Okay, so like I said, we're going to talk about anxiety in middle school students. Um, and it's going to go through basically four basic parts. We're going to talk about what anxiety is, what maintains anxiety, helping kids manage anxiety, and some resources that are available to you. So what I like to say is that in middle school, we see three different kinds of anxiety. And it's really important to understand that anxiety is not all bad. In fact, I surely hope that some of you are old enough to know the phrase, the good, the bad, and the ugly from the old Clint Eastwood Western. Anxiety is not by its nature bad. It is not 100% bad. Anxiety is the thing that prevents us from running out across a 6-lane highway. It's the thing that prevents us from cheating on a test. It's the thing that prevents us from jumping off a building or even making some risky social gestures. Anxiety can be a positive force to just check our disinhibitions. It can be bad, it can be problematic if we allow it to prevent ourselves from taking healthy risks or from feeling comfortable in situations. And of course, it can be ugly. And for many of our children right now, it really has become something that's overwhelming. But it does not always have to be that way. And as parents, if we see children who have some mild anxiety, we don't have to panic. We don't have to feel like, oh my gosh, there's a problem with my child. Some mild anxiety, especially in appropriate settings and situations, is a good thing. It's an internal sense of worry, dread, fear. It may or may not have a clear cause. And that's something that really becomes problematic for kids when they don't know why they're feeling anxious. And like I said, it can be very typical. Now, one of the things that I like to point out is there are some people who actually have a diagnosis of anxiety, a generalized anxiety disorder. And what we see in middle school very often is children who have this generalized anxiety disorder, and 1 week they're fine in a certain situation, and another week they're not fine at all in the exact same situation. The most common example that I have of that is, for instance, in 6th grade, there are several public speaking things that they have to do, particularly in science. They have to make a presentation. And they might be fine in the beginning of the year. They might have several times gotten up and made a presentation. And then all of a sudden, in the 3rd marking period, they have to do a presentation. And they say to the teacher, oh, I can't do that. I have fear of public speaking. And the teacher, we will sometimes hear, might say, she doesn't have any fears of public speaking. She's stood up many times and spoken in the class. And the issue is not the public speaking. It's that they have this free-floating anxiety. And a lot of times what happens is because our brains like to make sense of the world. We like to know, we like to understand why we're feeling a certain thing. So our brains will latch on to something and say, oh, well, that must be the thing that I'm anxious about. And so they will say it at that moment in time. They say, oh no, I have a fear of public speaking, when really they just have general anxiety. And this is what it's latching on to right now. And the thing is also, if we don't manage this correctly, it can become a fear of public speaking. It's something that can become very much connected and can become a real thing. But if we help our children understand, okay, this is what you're feeling today, this is what you're feeling now, you're not really afraid of public speaking, but you're anxious, and this is making you worried. But on another day, you may be fine with public speaking. Then it can stop being something that actually becomes a fear of public speaking. So like I said, there's a general anxiety, just general worries that people have, which can turn into phobias. And sometimes a phobia is based on a traumatic event or just a specific thing that happened, or sometimes it just is a strange thing that builds up in a person. Panic is something that is sometimes confused with anxiety. I sometimes have children telling me, oh, I'm having a panic attack, and they're not having a panic attack. They're having an anxiety attack, and that's really bad. I don't want to minimize, but it's a different thing. Most children don't have panic attacks. It tends to be something that you're a little bit older when you get, and with a panic attack, there really is this feeling that you actually right then and there might be dying. There's a lot of physiological things that happen in a panic attack. What most children are experiencing is an anxiety attack, and they're just so worried and feel very stuck and frightened and afraid, and there's no way they can do something. And that's bad enough. Anxiety and OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, are very closely related. And in fact, they are frequently considered to be comorbidities. They both have to do with serotonin. They're both treated similarly with cognitive behavioral therapy, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes. And they sometimes coexist. It's hard to say sometimes whether someone's obsessions or compulsions are really just a way of managing an anxiety. Social anxiety is something that really comes up in middle and high school. It is frequently a very healthy and normal thing, and not something that is pathological. It's a kid gets worried going to a party. And there are things that we can do to help kids prepare. I have the rules of how do you go to the 8th grade dance. I break them down for kids as this is what you're going to do to make sure the 8th grade dance is okay, or the 8th grade mixer is okay. And there are concerns about, how are you going to behave at maybe if your child might be invited to a bat mitzvah, or maybe if your child is going to be going to one of the mixers at school or canteens. And there are things that you can do. It's not necessarily full-blown diagnosable anxiety. And then, of course, there are trauma reactions. And many of us really are dealing with the aftermath of COVID as well as just like a long, drawn-out trauma. An interesting thing that I'm sure many of you know that I don't have to tell you, but the rest of the world might not know, is that many children who experienced anxiety actually felt more comfortable during COVID when they were able to be at home in a comfortable environment where they felt a level of control. Transitioning back to school for some of these children was traumatic. What we're seeing at SOMS is that a lot of that anxiety and trauma around school attendance is almost back to pre-COVID levels. Most children are doing well in terms of readjusting to being back at school when it comes specifically to the COVID situation. So a lot of diagnosable mental health issues don't look the same in children as they do in adults. And so sometimes we're confused when we see. It may not look like just worry. It can be worry. It can be just crying for reasons that we don't understand. The most common thing for both depression and anxiety among children is irritability and unexplained oppositional behavior. It's confusing to us because a child does not necessarily meet the definition that we would specifically think of as anxious, but it is more looking like irritability. Silly and goofy behavior dysregulation is very, very common, where a kid is just a little worried, or a kid just feels a little uncomfortable or awkward and just becomes just very silly or maybe a little bit wild. And a lot of that can be because they're just feeling so uncomfortable and don't know what else to do. The same thing on a lower grade is being antsy or fidgety or having difficulty concentrating. We would not be surprised when we see a child who is anxious to see self-doubt, fearful or clingy behavior. That seems to fit more with what we would expect, but we wouldn't necessarily think of sleep disturbance. And very, very common, we hear children talking about stomach disorder. They have a stomach ache, they're uncomfortable, they might somatize with a headache. And those feelings that they're feeling, those physical feelings that they're feeling, they're real. They aren't necessarily from a germ or a virus or bacteria, but they are very real to them in that moment. Repetitive behaviors, thoughts, and questions are an indication that someone is trying to control and understand and make sense of their environment. And so that sort of thing is also an indication of anxiety. And then left to its worst extreme is that somebody can start feeling panic about being in a certain situation. Okay, so one of the things that I wanted to show you, and this is something that I go over with my clients, I wanted to talk to you about this idea of what's happening in our brains. And I'm not going to read most of this stuff. What I really want to focus on is this section here, the amygdala. Sometimes it's called the lizard brain. It's really important that we understand it is the most primitive, the most ancient part of our brain. And it's called the lizard brain because reptiles in general, it's all they have is amygdala. Amygdala is the part of our brain that manages fight, flight, or freeze. It is the part of our brain, it's walnut size, it's at the base of our head. Kind of, you can see it's kind of low down there. And I'll explain why that's important in a few minutes. It's at the base of our head, and it is the thing that manages anxiety. What happens with some people, and in general, is their amygdala becomes overactive. That is what anxiety is. In a panic or an anxiety attack, the amygdala becomes hijacked, and it becomes completely overly responsive to situations that are going on. So when a child comes into my office and they are in an absolute panic, I keep this in mind, that their amygdala has hijacked the rest of their brain, and they are dealing with a fight, flight, or freeze response. The rest of their brain cannot function accurately if the amygdala is overly activated. And a big part of my practice with children is helping them to understand this. With younger children, we sometimes talk about our wise brain versus our worried brain. But in middle school and up, I really talk about brain function. I have another graphic that I use, but that has a lot more information on it. And with children, I go over it. And with adults, I actually use it with adults as well. But the type is so small that I thought you were going to hate me. But you can Google this yourself, what the anxious brain looks like. Okay. I just want to make sure, can someone just make sure that just say something so that I know you're still hearing me? Because I can't see anything.
You are good, Alison. Keep going.
Okay. So I'm in the one room of my house that has bad Wi-Fi. It's not terrible, but it turns out that the office doesn't get the best Wi-Fi. So, okay. So when a child comes into my office and I can see that they are overwhelmed with anxiety, I see that they are behaving in a very primitive way. They're breathing fast. There's butterflies in their stomach, which is an indication of adrenaline. They may need to go to the bathroom. They feel shaky and they're tense. They may be crying. Again, they feel stomach ache and headache. What I do with children in these situations is I explain to them, this is your body reacting to your amygdala. And I explain that it's very primitive. And so I talk to them about what they should do in this situation. And we talk about very quickly, this is an immediate thing. Say, okay, almost always they're hunched over. They're in a crouched position. I don't mean on the floor. I mean just kind of like kids are leaning forward, tense. That is a physiological response that is based on the amygdala overreacting. I tell them, we need to tell your amygdala that you're okay. So I tell them, put both feet on the floor and put your hands on your quads or your knees. Sit up straight. What that does is it gets you out of the crouching position. I say, take some deep breaths. We breathe deeply because it quickly gets oxygen to the amygdala, which is at the bottom of the brain. It moves things quickly. Now, physiologically, I don't know if that's 100% true, but that's what I tell them, and it works. That it gets it to that part of the brain, that small walnut size of the brain, quickly. So look around. And we look around. I said, this is what we're doing. We're using our senses. So your amygdala thinks that maybe there's a bear coming to get you, or maybe people are talking about you in the lunchroom, or maybe a car is about to crash into you. The amygdala is panicking and it's trying to protect you. We look around and we say, you're safe. Keep breathing. Sit up straight. Slow your breathing. When we breathe, we do things like box breathing, but I always tell them, hold your breath for 2 seconds between your breaths. because that also puts you back in control and tells your body, you don't need to saturate your blood with oxygen. You don't need to get ready to run away. You don't need to get ready to strike back. You are okay. And you are going to tell your body, which is going to tell your amygdala that you're okay. I say sit up straight, which means exposing your gut. When you hunch over, it's a primitive way of protecting your inner gut from whatever bear attack that your primitive brain thinks might happen. No, we're going to sit up straight because we are safe. And we're telling our brain through our body that we are okay. It's a very calming thing, and it's very effective. Children calm down rather quickly. When a child is even more activated, I have these things called calm down jars, which are essentially glitter jars, which I've timed to calm down in 90 seconds. It took me a summer to figure that out, the right proportion of glue to glitter to water. And within 90 seconds, the glitter settles. And usually that amount of deep breathing is enough time. So these are common physical reactions, and this is what I do in the immediate moment when I'm with a child, is I tell them that they're being hijacked by their amygdala. It's something that happens. Sometimes I use the phrase, right now your brain has gone kerflooey. It's just reacting in a way that doesn't bear a relationship to the trigger. So we have to calm ourselves so that we can react in a way that is proportional. So these triggers can be any number of things. And sometimes when we have a diagnosis of anxiety, sometimes we don't even know what that trigger is. Sometimes it can just happen. But we have those body reactions that I just described to you. And then what we start doing is we start behaving in ways that frequently reinforces the fear, reinforces the worry, as opposed to helping us to calm down and deal in a way that strengthens us. In particular, we begin to think things and behave in ways that reinforce the negative thinking, the problems, and the thing that made us anxious, as opposed to developing strategies for dealing with it. So, allowing or encouraging avoidance. This is one of the things that we can do for a child, or that the child does themselves to reinforce anxiety. This is not a great thing. If you avoid something, the fear becomes bigger. Now, I am not a brutal person. I am not saying that when a child is in the middle of something terrified, we throw them into the pool. What I like to say to parents, and what I like to say to children, if you are struggling, that's good. Struggle is good. It makes us stronger. Suffer is bad. So it's difficult as a parent to tease this out because we hate seeing our children that way. And many times we have anxiety. And so we will put onto the child that horrible feeling that we have. This is work that you need to do as a parent to be able to try to tease that out based on your knowledge of the child. By allowing or encouraging avoidance, it exacerbates and builds up whatever that fear is. Not letting a child have coping skills. This is something that I don't hear so much of, particularly with parents who would be involved with SEPAC. I'm going to talk more about this in a minute. I want to just go through this list here. Excessively reassuring a child. Our children are strong, and they don't need a false reassurance, and they don't need a reassurance of saying, I'm sure everything will be fine. I'm sure everybody will be delighted to see you at this party. You're going to do fabulously on the test. We want to be realistic and reminding a child of the skills that they have and the work that they've done to prepare themselves for it. And then taking over. And this relates to the lack of coping skills. So when maybe 20 years ago, we used to talk about helicopter parenting, and we're looking at that phase now. And we're seeing that really was not such a terrible phase. a parent hovering, a parent making sure that their child was okay, a parent just being super aware of what's going on with their child, that really was okay. It was different than the way children were raised in the 70s and 80s, which was, throw them out onto the street and say, be back by dinner. But it was not a overwhelming thing usually for most children. The phrase that we're using now that we're concerned about is, we sometimes say snowplow parenting, which is, I don't see this with most parents who have children who have IEPs, because they really have spent a lot of time thinking about the struggle that their child has and how to strengthen them. But I'm just giving you the information. So snowplow parent, I saw this a lot more about 5 years ago. Parents who never wanted their child to ever have a bad experience. And we know that our children have had bad experiences. It's hard for our children. We know that. So we're beyond that. But parents who never want their child to have a bad experience, so they go ahead and they plow the road in front of them so that everything is easy. And what happens is, because they feel these children have never had to struggle, they've never had to build up skills, they've never had to develop toughness and resilience and to pick themselves up when they've fallen down, they are not able to. And they begin to find the world a very, very frightening place. Particularly because they see other children struggling and they think, I could never do that. I've never had to do that. So like I said, I don't see that a ton with parents of children who have IEPs, but I do see that a little bit less than I did about 5 years ago, but it is something that's out there. It's important that we not take over for our children, even as young as kindergarten, that we partner with our children and say, how do you think we should solve this? We can certainly give them suggestions, we can certainly guide them, but our children have to be able to feel a sense of agency and ability and pride that they can solve problems. We're going to go into something in a second called thinking errors, and this comes out of the standard of care of what we now understand is the best way of helping almost anybody with depression, anxiety, OCD. Most issues are really well served by this thing called cognitive behavioral therapy. Many of you have probably heard of it. It's this idea that our thoughts and our behaviors have an impact on our feelings. So, I mean, I can't see any picture right now, but I remember what y'all looked like, and I think I was a lot older than most of you. I still remember a time when there was, and also when I was trained, we were still talking about Freudian stuff and deep, dark, murky, unconscious, and our mothers did it to us. And we just don't believe that anymore. We just don't believe that dredging up that stuff is the way of solving and helping people. What we really believe is that helping people to change the way they think about things, to change the way they act, is going to help them to feel better. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't develop relationships. It doesn't mean that we don't try to find out maybe why they feel a certain way, but we're more interested in what the thoughts are and what the behaviors are. So there is something called thinking errors, also known as thought distortions. You will hear, if you ever have been with a therapist who does CBT, which is almost all of us at this point, or just if you're doing any reading on your own, they're almost interchangeable terms, thinking errors or thought distortions. And there are some really classic ones. Oh, this is so small. I don't know if you guys can see this. I hope you can. So I'm going to go over, I believe there are about 12 that I'm going to go over right now. So one of the most common ones, particularly with our children, is who have anxiety. It's almost like they become a negative Nelly. They ignore the good. So they really only pay attention to bad things. And when something good happens, they discount it. I had a client recently who got awarded a prize. This is a high school student. They got awarded a prize for their team. And it wasn't like MVP or something. Anyway, the client said, yeah, but that's a made up award. I said, well, how many awards did they give out? 4. And how many people were on the team? 20. It's not a made up award, but they discounted it because it wasn't one of the ones that they knew already. It's really a very common thing for somebody who becomes anxious is that they are unable to see the good. Blowing things up is another way of saying catastrophizing. So it's making a really big deal out of something small and really seem like it's the worst thing ever. And spending a lot of time on the negativity. What these things do is cause our brain to begin to be in a negative point of view and to begin to see things and feel a great deal of worry about these problems. An interesting one is fortune telling, which means that you think that you know what's going to happen. You predict, and and the fact is we almost always predict negatively. We think, well, I know that it's not going to go well because it didn't go well last time. I know that nobody's going to want to sit with me. I know that I'm not going to get into the play, and it's being predictive because you have a feeling. Another one is mind reading, which is that you feel like you know what someone else is, and you look at somebody and they look at you a funny way, and you say, "Oh, they must dislike me, or they must not want to be with me." Or you read a situation and you put your negative thoughts into somebody else's brain. And one of the things that I always tell my clients is, I have been doing this for 25 years, and I'm telling you that if I don't know what your friend is thinking, you don't know what your friend is thinking. I've been in middle school for longer than you've been alive. If I don't know, then you don't know. And the fact is, I don't know. And that's why when I'm working with my clients, I always say to them, tell me what that means to you. What are you thinking? Tell me. I never pretend that I know what someone feels because I don't. I'm not a mind reader. Another one is negative labeling. So it's taking something that you maybe don't do great. So for instance, I'm not good in math. I'm so dumb. I'm so dumb. I'm just a really terrible student. That's really not, that's really extrapolating from one bad thing and universalizing it into many bad things when it's an unreasonable thing. Setting the bar too high. And we also frequently talk about perfectionism. And this is something that's a real struggle. The perfectionism, it tends to frequently be more of an issue with girls. This idea of having to be perfect, and that if you get a 91, that's a failure. I do sometimes even hear parents talking about a C grade as a failure, and it's really important that we discuss with them that an F is a failure, a C is not. It's not a great grade. We'd like it to be better, but it's not a failure. Setting the bar so high that we are unable to feel good about the successes that we have, particularly when something is hard for us. Taking all the responsibility or personalizing, so self-blaming, and saying that you are the one that is responsible for if your two friends are fighting. Children frequently blame themselves if their parents are fighting. But this is something that adults do as well, saying that if things are going wrong, it's all your fault. Accepting that what you feel in a certain situation means that it's true. So if I'm not feeling good about a certain thing, then this thing is bad. If I'm upset about coming to this party, then nobody wants me at this party. If I thought I didn't do a good job, then I didn't do a good job, even though everybody else said I did a good job. Saying that your feelings are facts. And then should statements. Oh my goodness. These should statements also, I have to say as parents, this is something that we really want to just get rid of our vocabulary. Not only the should statements around how the world should be and getting very upset if the world is not the way it should be, which is very common in anxiety. It's one of the most powerful things. Kids should behave in class. The teacher should give us another chance. My friend should have known that I wanted to do something. Getting rid of these should statements, but also as parents to say, my child should be able to do this. we should have already developed these skills. Are you all still there?
Yes, we're here.
Okay,
We're here.
good, thank you. Oh my God, for a second I felt panic, like how long have I been going on? Okay, so getting rid of these should stories. These are the classic thinking errors. And they're really, they are the things that make us have a very difficult time in really perceiving our environment the way they are and feeling good about ourselves as we move through the world. The things that we can do to help children manage anxiety. I need to make sure, I want to go back on the thinking errors. I don't know how to go back on the slide. Wait, maybe backspace? Yes, okay. The thing that that it's really important is I don't expect any parent to be a therapist, but it is important that we gently sometimes question some of these thoughts. And a therapist is going to be the one that can really help to counter some of these thoughts. But as parents, we can gently question them. And it's important that we do that and that we articulate some of these things to our children. That we say something like, oh my gosh, today at work, I did this and this, and I was so upset with myself. And I really felt like, oh, everybody is going to be so mad at me. But then I realized, you know what? I don't know what people are feeling. And it turned out they weren't mad at me. That we can articulate things like that so they can see the difference. The other thing that we have to really do, and there isn't a slide about this, and I'm sorry about that, but is an emphasis on gratitude. This is a thinking skill that I would like to emphasize, and I'm sorry there's no slide on this. It's very important that we differentiate a false sort of brittle, everything's fine, I'm really fine, and a false projection of happiness and that everything is okay. Differentiation of that between gratitude for the things that are good in our lives. That's a challenge that a lot of people who are anxious have trouble with. And it's a challenge that a lot of people who have depression have trouble with. Being able to see the good, to acknowledge the good, and to spend time in their minds with the good. Being able to do that gives us the ability to reset and to engage with our world with a more positive attitude, to counter these thinking errors. And so many people write gratitude journals. There's a form of meditation, which is meditating on gratitude. This is a very powerful tool. Additionally, making sure that your child gets good sleep and is eating and is moving. All of these things are really important for helping a child to be physically able to engage with their world as their best self. Energy movement is something that is underrated and really important, and we really encourage all people to be physically fit and physically able as best they can. Not only does it help you feel more able to engage with your environment, but it does produce endorphins in your brain, which are the feel-good chemicals. Helping children to understand what their strengths are and building on them, articulating their strengths. We sometimes call that developing a sense of mastery, knowing what they did well. So saying to that child, wow, you were really nervous about going in there and yet you crushed it. You know what I saw you do? You did this, you did that, and you articulate the positives that they did and the things that made them successful. And so that they begin to know exactly what the skills are that they're developing. Not overbooking kids and activities. That's particularly challenging for kids who are perfectionists because they feel like they must be achieving at all times. I can't tell you how many kids are telling me in 7th grade what they are preparing for their college applications. It's completely unnecessary, and it doesn't help them in any way. Leaving kids time to just be a kid, socializing, having time to just be relaxed, and then connection. which is among the most important things that you can do. Having time with friends, family, animals, nature, things that are important, people that are important. I will tell you, as a middle school social worker over the years, I've worked with many children around academics. And with parents' permission, I will frequently try to negotiate a reward with a child. If you do certain, or an incentive, if you do certain things, you know, what are some things that you might like to have that would make you feel like you'd really achieve something? What's something that you could ask your parent for? And, you know, I remember 10 years ago, the kids were asking for a flat screen TV. Now they're asking for, like, I think a Nintendo Switch or something. And I'm like, no, we're not talking about something that big for doing what you should be doing. What about if you get to go with mom and just get ice cream, the two of you? Or what about if you get to spend time with your parent or your dad, just watching a movie, the two of you, or building Legos with your dad? And what's really interesting is almost always children will say in middle school, when I say, you know, no to them, I'm not going to negotiate with your parents or advocate that you get a Nintendo Switch, but I will say that you can go with dad to get ice cream. Most kids' reaction is, "Aw, okay, yeah, no, that would be good." And so what I need to let you know is that going with you to spend time together, just the two of you, is frequently almost as valuable as a large, expensive material thing. And in fact, the reality is that's what they really want. Spent a lot of time this week and last week asking children for what they got and what they wanted over the holidays. And for most of the kids, their favorite part of the holiday was spending time with you. So connection is the most important thing. We encourage connection with friends. Many of our children have trouble making and keeping friends. We encourage them with family, with animals, with teachers, and being in structured social situations so that they can at least experience some connection. If your child does come to you very anxious and worried, a way of managing this is by using the calm strategy. Do not get sucked into the tornado of your child's emotion. Catch your breath, pause, spend a minute, and plan a response. Absolutely be supportive of your child, accept their feelings. You can say, "I'm so sorry you're feeling that way," or "that does seem difficult." But do not amp up your reaction to either match or exceed theirs. This isn't helpful to them. The point of what we're trying to do is show children that there are challenges, but they can manage it. Acknowledge and be real. I see, I understand, or, "Oh, I'm sorry that's happening. That does seem difficult." You can label their emotions. You can say, I can see this is upsetting. You seem nervous. I don't blame you. You seem angry. That's really a challenging thing. But then one of the phrases that I use with kids all the time, and I use it with myself when I get upset, is I say, when I get worried, is I say, problems were meant to be solved. I use this phrase all the time. Problems were meant to be solved. And so I stop and I think to myself, how am I going to manage this? And I say to the class, and I model coping skills with kids by saying, this is an upsetting thing. We're going to work on this, and we're going to be able to figure this out. Frequently, we'll say to kids, so South Orange Middle School is a circle, more or less, on the ground floor and on the second floor. So sometimes we'll even say to a kid, do you want to take a lap? We give kids the opportunity to just take a minute and calm themselves down. With littler kids, we might say things like, let's shake it off. Let's shake it off. Sometimes I will say to a kid, let's just blow out, with very little kids and with sixth graders, and say, let's blow out this feeling. The reason I say that is because the inhale is what they really need, is giving them some fresh oxygen, because if they're panting, they're not breathing deeply, which is what they need to do. So it's catching your breath, accepting the feelings, explaining to them, helping them to understand what they're feeling, not matching your emotion with their emotion, and certainly not exceeding their emotion. And then modeling coping skills, demonstrating to them how you handle a situation. Coping skills are the ability to calm down physically. As I discussed, sitting up, and I do this very calmly and gently with children. I say, okay, we're going to try to go through some things that'll help you to feel better. Let's sit down, sit up straight, open up your chest, put your shoulders back, take some deep breaths. So calm down physically. If a child is upset and crying, I say, okay, let's talk this through. Let's work this out. If they say, I can't talk about it, oh my God, it's not going to do any good. And we discussed this before. It's like, do you know what? Problems were meant to be solved. Maybe we came up with the wrong solution last time. Let's figure out a better one together. Creating a plan B. Now, depending on the child, they may want a worst case scenario. You need to know your child. Personally, I do very well with worst case scenarios. Because what that tells me, again, it reminds me that there's always a solution. Problems were meant to be solved. So if there's a worst case scenario, I've got the solution. And then there are all these better case scenarios, but I always feel confident that I know I'm going to be fine no matter what happens. And then reminding the child that they've been successful with this before, that this is really hard. You know that, but they dealt with it before. One of the most beautiful ways of talking to a kid around anxiety is to talk about it in terms of surfing a feeling. So to actually imagine a child's on a surfboard and that the emotion is the wave. And you tell the child, we're going to surf on the top of this wave right now. You're not going to be engulfed by it. It's not going to be here forever. The emotion is going to go, and I'm here with you, and you're going to be okay. The feeling is going to pass. We just have to tough it out while this feeling is going on, and letting them know that this is a feeling. This isn't their life. The feeling will pass. They've had it before. It's passed before. They survived it. We give children body relaxation strategies, awareness of the physical signs of anxiety. Again, being crouched over, hunching forward, deep breaths, shoulders up around their knees. These are all things that are very primitive ways of dealing that our amygdala tells us because we are in this self-protection mode. We do deep breathing instead. We relax our muscles. We sit back. We telegraph to our mind that we are okay by making our body behave in a way that's okay. We can do visualizations. That doesn't work for me. It might work for some people, but it's there. It is something that people do recommend. I mean, I find that just physically calming myself is the most thing, but it's really important to use your parent power, which is modeling brave, encouraging, and non-anxious behavior. Do not match your emotion with their emotion. Be gentle, but encourage them, and be real with them. I know you're upset right now. I know that I can tell that you're upset with me, but I've been through this before and you've been through this before. You're going to be okay. We're going to work this out together. And pay attention as they start to be less anxious, that you don't have to circle back to make them anxious again. Allow them to come out of it. Another thing to keep in mind, most of you are here because your child does have an IEP. Connect with the case manager. Let them know what's going on. Many of you may have a counseling social worker. At South Orange Middle School, that's Miss Goodwin. At Maplewood Middle, it's Dana Pierre, I think is his last name. There's actually 3 at Maplewood Middle because not all of them are full-time. Many of you may have a social work intern. If counseling is not in your child's IEP and the counseling need is smaller, you may have a social work intern, which is a great thing to have as well. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. Keep your teachers involved. apprise them of situations that might be going on. Particularly middle school teachers, it's important to remember that middle school is not just high school for short people. Middle school is a team-based facility. The teachers talk to each other unless you ask them not to. They share things and they work together, understanding that although they are teaching content, they're really teaching children. It's that last phase before it becomes so content focused in high school. And then of course, please let the nurse know, particularly if there's medication. Around things such as OCD, a lot of times parents feel like, well, I don't want my child to be labeled. Sometimes the label is really helpful in us knowing what skills and techniques and strategies to help your child with. Collaborate with us so that we can help your child. And know that in our district in particular, most of the social workers have their LCSW, not all of them, but most of us, but we're all very collaborative with each other. When we have a challenging situation, we call each other, we work together, and we're sophisticated. We don't slap labels on kids and then do one size fits all. We really try to work with children in an eclectic manner and in a way that is very child-centered. So there are case managers, there are social workers, teachers, the nurse.
Alison, can I pause you for just a second? I just wanted to clarify something before we go too much into what happens at SOMS. One of the challenges of doing a meeting about both middle schools is that the programs are very similar, but they're a little bit different. So Alison's going to talk a little bit about kind of what's there in general and what's kind of there specifically at SOMS. Know that it's a little bit different at MMS, but the overall gist of it is the same, that you're going to kind of start at the same place and you're going to hopefully end at the same place with some really good support for your kid. And then Caroline's going to talk in a minute about the hub, which is specific to MMS for various reasons. But even if you're a SOMS parent, listen, because there is a sister program at the high school that is really good to be aware of before your kid gets into high school. And then when we get to Dr. Zarabi, he's going to talk about iStep, which covers both schools. So just keep in mind that there could be some differences in exactly how things go, but the overall gist of the support is the same. So sorry, take it away again.
Absolutely. And the important thing to remember is there is a lot of mental health support for our children in this district. So one of the things that I always say is there's like Parenting 101. And Parenting 101, it's like the basic level of parenting, and y'all are beyond that. This is this kid where just everything is easy. They have a few bad days every now and then, but you're able to talk to your friends. Maybe you read a magazine article, you talk to your parents, and everything works it out. Parenting at the 200 level is where maybe you've read a book or a couple of books and you've really thought about it. And of course, again, I'm talking about mental health issues. Parenting at a 300 level is where your child continues to suffer or struggle without success. Difficulties are severe, and strategies they aren't working. Things are difficult in your home or at school, and it's really starting to activate your anxiety around this. Now, if you are an anxious person, you have to know that about yourself, because like if you wake up in the morning anxious, and that's not a reason to reach out for a social worker for your kid. But if this is activating anxiety in an unusual way for you, these are things to tell you. We are good in a middle school. We will support any kid. I want to make this clear. We will support any child that comes to us. But where we will be successful is with a child who has mild to moderate issues. We're a school-based program. And when I say me, I mean all of the mental health programs in any school, just about, is a school-based program where we work with children who are mild to moderate. Now, Dr. Zarabi is going to talk about where things are a little bit more severe, but other than the I-STEP program, we are going to be most successful with children who have mild to moderate symptoms. Severe symptoms, we really suggest a outside therapy, and we can help you with referrals for that. We do individual and group with a social work intern. We deal with anxiety, managing feelings in general, helping. So there are a lot of children who just need to have another adult in the building. We're great for that. They don't need a diagnosis, helping children just build their confidence. Children who have social skills issues, issues around transitioning back from COVID-19. Peer pressure and bullying is a very big part of what we do. Children who have trouble behaving appropriately in their classes. Of course, if there's any issues around loss or family changes, we work with children. And if you need referrals to outside therapists. We work with children also around executive functioning. At South Orange Middle, I set up our program so that although our school day is from 8:15 to 3:15, the social work interns mostly come in from 9:15 to 4:15, so that they are there to run a daily homework club. So for children who have trouble with managing homework, we're there to help with that. And we don't do a lot of content support. We'll do a little, but it's not like a tutor. This is really just more for kids who maybe have executive function issues, or just have trouble at home doing their homework. We're there for that. This is the QR code I was talking about. You can scan it if you would like a social work intern. It usually takes just a few days for us to get back to you. Sometimes it might take a little bit more. In December, it took a little more because the interns were, all going out on their university breaks, but we're usually pretty quick. And there are some resources. In particular, I would urge you just to go to the Child Mind Institute. They're really wonderful on anxiety. There's also other resources out there for anxiety. Dr. Zarabi, I know, will probably talk about some as well. And if you need anything, of course, just reach out to me. I think that's it. Yes.
Oh, amazing. That was so much valuable information, Alison. It's like so appreciated. I can't even stand it. Really, I mean, that was very comprehensive. I love it. Okay, so let's shift over a little bit now to something that's a little more MMS specific, which is Caroline Raba, and she is the coordinator for the Hub, which is actually an outside group that operates through the middle school to provide some support. So we'll learn more about that from her. Take it away, Caroline.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So my name is Caroline Raba. I'm the coordinator of the Hub at Maplewood Middle School. As Kelly said, we are an outside funded program. We're actually grant funded through the state to be in the school. We're operated actually by Family Connections, which is an Essex County local nonprofit. But I have a few slides just about who we are and what we can, share and what we offer. So let me just share my screen really quickly. All right. So the Hub at Maplewood Middle School, and as Kelly said also earlier, we do have a sister program called The Loft, which is at Columbia High School. So very similar model in that they also have a clinician, a youth development specialist. They also have an extra clinician there called a preventive juvenile delinquency specialist. And, but our programs run very similar. So we are the Hub. And the Hub is a school-based youth services program that is free of cost for any current student at Maplewood Middle School. So again, everything we offer is completely free, and we provide, we provide individual counseling, we provide peer support groups, family counseling, as well as recreation is our bread and butter pretty much every day after school, and all services are confidential. So our staff here, I am the coordinator. We have 2 youth development specialists. We have a clinician. And we actually have 2 clinical interns. One is a youth development specialist who's been here for about almost 2 years. So she knows the kids really, really well. And the other is actually a teacher. So she comes after school to run activities with the kids, meet with some of the individual referrals that we have as well, on top of our clinician and our youth development specialist. We get an influx of referrals a lot of times due to kids needing that extra support that maybe the guidance staff is getting overwhelmed with. And one thing also is a lot of our students then end up coming to us for individual support, or that's group support, because they're comfortable with us, but also we're somewhat outside of the school while still being inside of the school. So they might feel a little more comfortable, like if they're having issues with a teacher or a peer that we don't know, they might feel more open talking to us about it, because some of the times we don't know who these teachers are. So we allow them that freedom to be able to completely vent if they need to. So as I said, we have individual support opportunities. So students can be referred to the hub by a parent, a guidance counselor, a teacher. Often even just hub staff have noticed, and then we speak with guidance, we speak with the parent, we speak with the student, and it becomes a collaborative effort. And then the student would be assigned to work with either our clinician or one of our 2 clinical interns, just depending on everyone's caseload. Meetings can take place during school, such as during an elective, if a student is doing really well in, like, say, chorus or band or peer connection, during lunch or after school. We have a small private office located within the school. We do our individual meetings. On top of, we have a larger office that I'll kind of speak on in just a second. So some groups we offer. So on Tuesdays and Thursdays, we open our office during all the lunch periods and create a smaller environment. And one thing we wanted to do is, especially, we had the idea of doing this for students who were new, whether it was to the school or due to the redistricting, new to the district, or all their friends may have ended up at SOMS, whereas they went to Maplewood Middle, kind of a thing. And we wanted to create this smaller environment because lunch can be so overwhelming to kids, especially when you're new. It turned into some kids being new, some kids being kids who have grown up in this district, but then they bring friends. And our max capacity in our office is about 10 to 12 kids. So it creates such a smaller environment for these kids to get to know each other and take some of that pressure off. And also just, it's not nearly as loud and chaotic as the cafeteria can be. Another group, 2 groups we offer, which are both after school, is our Teen Summit and our Boys Group. So Teen Summit is geared towards our female students, Boys Group towards our male students. Both groups are facilitated by a hub staff member and a clinical intern. And they're both just safe spaces for the kids to express themselves, chat about stressors going on in their lives, as well as get some peer support from other kids, whether it's a kid in another grade or a friend who knows exactly what they're going through. Other things, other offerings. So our program actually is every day after school. Immediately once the bell rings, we operate out of the cafeteria, and some days of the week also out of the gym. We're here until 5:30 every day. But obviously if the school's closed, we're closed. We are a safe space for students to come to unwind, do homework, spend time with friends, make new friends through our different activities that we do. So we'll do open recreation in the gym, different arts and crafts, things with, like, we've done meditation jars. This month is, I believe, there's a day considered National, like, Self-Love Day later in the month. So we're going to be doing like positive affirmation jars where the kids will put positive things about themselves in a jar to take it home. So if they ever are feeling down, they can pull out, like, I am smart, I have lots of friends, I am trustworthy, so on and so forth. And then we provide a monthly calendar of activities. And also we do actually do some smaller field trips, such as we've gone to, like, Yestercades, the movies, and rented out a theater and all of that good stuff. And we've seen a lot of kids of all different grades come together, bond, get to know each other. And then that creates this, like, lovely environment in the hallways, because this 6th grader now is kind of friendly with this 8th grader because they play basketball together. And that's not pairing you wouldn't always see. And so then contact us. This is my contact information here. We're also on Remind, where we post our calendar every month as well as any updates. And I can also provide all this information as well as our consent form in the chat. The link to our consent form in the chat here for anyone who would like it.
That was fantastic information, Caroline. Thank you. We'll just go ahead and ask this one question because it's always on the minds of everyone at SOMS is why is this at MMS but not at SOMS?
So that is actually something you'd have to take up with the state.
Yeah.
So this is only my second school year as coordinator, but from what I gather and understand is that either it was through MMS or I'm not sure if it's through the state, the district, the town. The grant was given to Maplewood Middle School, whether they're the ones who applied and said, hey, we want this program. But that's my greater understanding is that it's through the state, and the state is the one who, like the Department of Children and Families is who funds us technically. So they were the ones who implemented us in the school, whether that was an application process from MMS's part, but the hub has been at MMS long before I ever worked at Family Connections and long before I ever worked at the school. So that's my greatest understanding. And I'm sorry I can't give more information.
No, that's
as to
good.
why it's at one versus the
I can
other.
actually give a
Well,
little.
Okay.
Information looks like, yeah.
So the year that I started here was the year that the hubs began. So about 16, 17 years ago. And there is literally there are these grants that are floating out there that can be given. And there was already the loft at the high school, and there was another one to be brought to our school. And at one point it was considered for South Orange Middle. At that time, that very year, there was a crisis at Maplewood Middle relating to the library. And because of the physical proximity of the library at Maplewood Middle and some staffing issues at the library, there was like this perfect storm of Maplewood Middle children going over to the library and using the library as aftercare. And the children were not behaving well. And there was this feeling, what should we do with this? And there was the feeling of, you know what, this is available. There's only one grant available. Let's bring it to Maplewood Middle. At that time, so that's when I started this thing. We did something, I mean, those of you who are really old will remember there was the President's Ball. We got the President's Ball. The president of South Orange Village did a fundraiser with us. We helped him. We got a lot of money for South Orange Middle, and we started an after-school program, which eventually was taken over by, I can't remember what they're called. I'll remember it in a minute. It's an anti-drug coalition in the community. It morphed into After the Bell. After many years. And so South Orange Middle does have some after school programming. And we have certain things that are just different. The schools are not completely symmetrical, and it's just the way it works out. But that grant lives with Maplewood Middle School.
Gotcha. Thank you. Okay, we are getting very late, so Dr. Zarabi, thank you for your patience. If you would like to take us through iStep, which is a program that is done at both middle schools, and Dr. Zarabi partners with his counterpart at MMS, so the programs are very similar in this instance, right?
So Kelly, do you want me to share myself, or did you have the slides that you were going
You
to
can share if you want to, or I can share if it's easier for you, whatever you want to do. I've got it up just in case, so.
Yeah, my end it says host disabled participant
Oh,
screen
that's
sharing.
right. And I don't know if I can actually, I'll share because I'm not sure if I can add you as a host with Beth
Okay.
not here. Let me, whoosh. Now I have to share. This is always scary. Okay, slideshow.
Yeah.
Okay, tell me when to click.
Perfect. Okay. So, hey, everybody, good evening. Michael Zarabi. I'm a psychologist at South Orange Middle School. Quick little background on me in case any of you are not familiar. This is about my 22nd year as a psychologist in the New Jersey education system. I was in 2 districts before South Orange Maplewood. I started in South Orange Maplewood in 2012. I was a case manager psychologist on the Clinton and Tuscan child study teams. And then I went to Maplewood Middle for 1 year as a case manager there, psychologist. And then I was asked to coordinate a new program at SOMS called iStep, which I'll get to in a second about the background of that. But I'm the coordinator of iStep at South Orange Middle School, and Amy Patuco, my counterpart, is the licensed clinical social worker at MMS, coordinating iStep there. Okay, we can go to the next one. Okay, so basically it began in 2014, and the district had a program at Maplewood Middle School called ESS, or Effective School Solutions, which we actually currently have now in the high school. And this is a private program that the district paid for. And so at that time, the director of special services and the principal and MMS, came together and they said, you know what? We need to create something here with, a clinician who can really work specifically with our students and get a deeper understanding of what's going on, instead of having this other program that we're, bringing in. Let's develop our own. So that began in 2014. 2 years later, the program was a big success, and the director then had asked me if I wanted to consider coordinating the program at SOMS because of the need there. And so absolutely, that was a wonderful thing because we also the need, and it was important to begin the same program at that school. So in roughly 2016 is when we started at SOMS. Okay, great. So what we do, right? So iStaff, which stands for In-School Therapeutic Education Program, it provides intensive wraparound counseling to help students with their social, emotional, behavioral issues that impact them at school. Now, I'm going to actually just add to that because a few years ago, we did add an academic component. So it's counseling and academic assistance, which I'll get into as well. So what this program is, it's a program really essentially that is given to students when other things that have been tried have not worked. So for students who have gone through counseling or other kind of interventions and nothing was really working, and now they kind of need a step up of more intensive of treatment, which I'll get into more specifically. And so, when parents and staff are really trying to, figure out what can we do next, where it's, the general counseling program wasn't really effective, or maybe the student just wasn't working with certain staff, there needs to be something else and more. This is when iStep is considered. Okay. So there's a lot of different services we provide, but essentially in terms of counseling, I'll start there. So I'm the person who provides counseling for the iStep program at SOMS. So I provide individual counseling and group counseling weekly. In addition, I provide parent/family counseling, and what that is about 2 to 3 times a year, roughly, give or take. We set up parent progress meetings. And then in addition, anytime a parent in our program that wants to meet with us can. And so me and and the teacher who works with iStep, Ms. Maria Schotz, we come together and we go over the progress of iStep for each student in our program. We run through that roughly twice a year, sometimes more. Family counseling is a component that we do sometimes as well, when the parents feel like they need to come in and we all have a session together on how to work out things that are happening within the school or issues that are occurring that we can map out. We will do, like it says, morning and end of day check-ins. I mean, frankly, I do check-ins all day long, but essentially it's check-ins throughout the day if certain students need that. We have crisis intervention. So, and I'll get into the profile of the students, but a lot of the students in iStep have significant psychiatric issues, and there is crisis at times. There can be things as like suicidal ideation, self-harm, things of that nature that, you know, we need to address. So that is definitely part of it. Supervised lunch. So there are some students who just need a quieter place, and that's part of also what we offer. But during lunch, it's just very loud, and we have a place where they can come and invite one of their friends and sit with. Sometimes we've done in the past little supervised groups during lunch. That's also possible depending on the situation. But, you know, kids, at least twice a week, kids come down to have a quieter lunch by themselves or with a friend. Quiet room timeout. This is used a lot. So we have a lot of kids who just need a safe place to just relax for a little bit. It could be 5 minutes. It could be 50. I mean, we've had kids that are there, you know, a long time. So they know they can come down there, and each student receives a pass that they can use. Some kids don't want to express it to a teacher. They don't want to say, can I see Dr. Zarabi? Can I see Ms. Schultz? They just can show the pass and done. Some teachers even now just know they can kind of, we work with teachers on the signs to look for in class. They just know if a student needs that help. Constantly working with teacher and staff, administration. We're always having meetings. I mean, if I'm not in a session, I'm in a classroom, I'm talking to a teacher, we're consulting. What's going on? How do we figure it out? If there's a disciplinary issue, I make sure that I am notified immediately, because sometimes I need to sit with that student and help them and translate for them, meaning they speak English, but help them translate. What are they actually saying to the administrator? Maybe they don't understand, and I can help them. I can not necessarily speak for them, but make the administrator aware that this is what they're going through. And that is a big help sometimes if there's a disciplinary issue. We're constantly working with outside coordinators, because many of our students, not all, but I would say at least 90% of our kids have outside providers, outside therapists, and psychiatrists as well, so we're always speaking with them to coordinate treatment. We attend IEP and 504 meetings. Just so everyone's aware, ISTEP is not just for students who have IEPs. It is not just for students who have 504s. It's for all students who, and I'll just explain the referral process soon, who demonstrate that need. So we are attending IEP meetings, we're attending 504 meetings to suggest interventions, to give updates, to meet, you know, it's actually a very important part of ISTEP. And then the academic support is Ms. Schultz, and Ms. Schultz is not taking place of a teacher. She's not creating a whole lesson and instructing the children, the students. She is adding assistance. She's following up with teachers. Have they missed stuff? Can they come to her room to make up some work? Do they need a little bit of more help with certain things? She also can provide organizational help as well. So that's the kind of support. Do you need to take a test in her room? My room too. Some kids just need a quiet place to take a test. And teachers know they can come down to our room to take tests there. Okay. Great. So as I was saying before, this is the kind of a idea of what the ISTEP academic support looks like. So monitoring of assignments and grades, reviewing the grades of the students, even me with the parents sometimes, speaking to the gen ed and special ed teachers to modify the work as needed. Now, to be aware, we are not case managers, meaning we are not the case manager who makes sure kind of the IEP is put in place and being followed. We're not doing that, but we are aware of what the IEP accommodations are and the 504 accommodations. So being aware of it, Ms. Schultz will go in and make sure, you know, this student has this. Are we kind of, you know, where are we with this? You know, how are we managing this? So we're not monitoring it. We're not having the IEP meetings like the case manager, but we are aware of it and we're helping out there. Work plan. So how can we structure the assignments? Oh, it's okay. No worries. Okay. So
you want me to go back, or you
yeah,
want
you
to
go back real quick. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Oh wait, I don't know if I don't know
Yeah,
how. Wait, hang on, I'm gonna get there.
No problem. No problem.
There we go. We're all set.
Yeah, you're good. Thank you. Organizational support. So we have students who have ADHD. ADHD, and something I'll discuss in their profile, is not the primary issue, but they have some organizational difficulties. So we do that as well. Constant communication with parents, emailing, calling. Sometimes, I do call quite a bit, and sometimes, I don't want to bother parents, and I just feel like parents should be in the know. And when they're not, it's unsettling. And I've been there. I have 2 kids in school. I want to be aware, especially in this program. I think it's important to understand that this is a specialized program for students who really need that extra level of support. And the parents, they need that. They need you to let them know that, listen, there was an incident today, or, there's an academic situation. So it's important that communication is vital. And then, of course, direct assistance with schoolwork as well, as I mentioned before. Okay. Okay, so the one back. The student profile. So, what was the one after? Oh, okay. I'll go here. It's fine. No, I'm sorry.
Okay, yeah, no, that's the next slide. I can
No,
skip
that's
ahead.
fine. I'm sorry. My mistake.
Okay.
The referral process. This is important because I want to make something clear here, that the referral process only comes from child study team, guidance counselors, school social workers, and administration. It is not generated by parents. So if a parent calls me and says, hi, I'd like my student to be an ISTEP, I'll say, I appreciate you calling. Here's some information about ISTEP, but I will ultimately refer the parent back to begin with the counselors. So basically, prior to making a referral, okay, the referral source, so it's the guidance counselor, the CST person, will come to me and Maria, and we'll talk about, here we have John, and John is struggling with so-and-so. We're not sure if this is ISTEP, but we want to talk about it and we want to see what's going on. And we'll discuss what has been done prior. Has there been counseling? Have there been interventions? What's going on? And we sit together and we discuss that and collaborate. And if it's an appropriate referral, there's a referral form that's filled out and sent to me. And then I call the parent directly to set up that initial intake where we go over what's specifically going on and making a final decision if it's appropriate. Usually by then, to be honest, it is appropriate, but I always want to make sure, because there have been times where I have had parents come in and the parents will say, oh, you know what, I'm not sure if this is what we were looking for, or if this is the right thing for my, for my child. So it's important to know that it's not generated from parents, but if a parent calls and they have questions about the program, absolutely, have no problem speaking about that. I'll give you details about it. And then you can work with your guidance counselor, or whether it's Ms. Steiner, Ms. Goodwin, any of the counselors, the administrators, and then we can go from there. So that's something important to be aware of. And if a teacher has an issue with a student, meaning that the teacher is finding the student struggling, the teacher will then go to the either the case manager if the student has an IEP, or the counselor or whoever, and then that's how the process can begin. Okay. Great. So student profile. So our students, as I said before, the majority of them, pretty much, I would say all of them, have significant psychiatric, I shouldn't say all, I should say, 90% of them have significant psychiatric challenges. And it's a situation where their social emotional functioning really impacts the school and classroom. So we will have a student who has bipolar disorder. Or I shouldn't say bipolar because it's not diagnosed then, but someone who is having mood swings. We have children who have depression, who have generalized anxiety, OCD, significant anger that manifests as crying or yelling in the classroom. Students who just cannot maintain every day, who need that extra support. What we do is we look at a student's profile, and we don't necessarily want to deny any student services. However, we do have to have a criteria because we just don't take everyone. So it's certain students who present with a certain profile. So do we have students who have autism? Yes, we do. Is autism the main symptoms of autism the primary issue for us? No, actually, what we see is that for kids who are on the spectrum, their primary issue that brings them to ISTEP is their anxiety or their difficulty navigating the building socially, behaviorally. It's not a student who may have like mild to moderate autism spectrum disorder and may need behavioral interventions. We're talking about psychological challenges, social and emotional functioning. We have students who have ADHD. Is it just for students who have ADHD? Not exactly. So if a student's referred and they have ADHD and they have organizational difficulties and they're having trouble, with executive functioning, that would not be a student in ISTEP. But we have students with other psychological challenges that do have ADHD as a secondary issue. So I just wanted to make that clear, and I can answer the questions after that if it's unclear. But the main issues are social and emotional, not necessarily like organization or behavioral. Okay, so it's that's kind of what we're looking for. Like I said, students usually have outside clinicians. Many of the students are on medication, but it's not a requirement. None of that's a requirement, but that is typically the profile. We also want parents to be engaged, right? So we need you. We need you to be part of this. We need you to talk to us and inform us and send us emails and let us know what's going on, so we can incorporate that into our counseling, into our academic support. In general, ISTEP students are those students who need more frequent and intensive counseling than the weekly counseling provided by a school social worker. It doesn't mean that the school social worker was not providing adequate treatment. It just means that student may need more. That's what we're saying here. But who can navigate a public school setting with the appropriate support. So that's the profile of our students. Okay. Okay. Once the referral is received, I received that from those people, I said the counselors and the administrators. An intake appointment is made with the parent. Typically, the parents attend the initial intake, which is a comprehensive biopsychosocial interview to determine appropriateness for the program. So it's an entire social background and history on the student up until where we are today, triggers and past evaluations and treatment programs. A lot of our students were in places like Gen Psych and treatment facilities and outpatient facilities, and now they're coming back in, or it was in their past when they were in elementary school. Later, the ISTEP counselor, myself, and the Shook teacher, we meet with the student. Now, in the past, when we were having more people come into the building, we were doing that all together, but usually now we'll meet with the parent first, and then we meet with the student afterwards. Okay, and at that time also, just so you got everybody's aware, usually, like I said before, the students are already appropriate at that time, but we just make that final decision at the intake, and then there are some forms to fill out, and then we start seeing the student away. I want everybody to know that ISTEP has a quick turnaround, meaning like you don't have to wait weeks and weeks and weeks to enter the program. When the referral comes in, I call the parent within a day, we meet within a week, the child can start right away. I've even had it where a child starts before the intake. I'd rather not do that because I like to have a background, but if it's an emergency, we start right away. I don't want you to think that this gets caught up in months of paperwork. It doesn't. It's not like that. What I was going to say about just meeting is that it's an easy process. It's not convoluted. We're very open. We talk easily with everybody. So as soon as the information comes to us, we set that up. We do have caps on our program in terms of how many students we take. So over the years, it's been a mix, but Amy and I, Patuka and I are typically cap the program around 13 or 14 students in that area. Sometimes we do more because, as me being the only counselor and having to set up all those sessions and only during certain times and attending all the meetings and Maria attending all the meetings, it's difficult to have, these are students who have significant needs. So I'm not just seeing a student once for individual and once for group. Often the student's coming down 3 times a week. So, and that's just one student. So it's involved. I love to see more kids. It's hard to say no. Ms. Steiner comes to me and other people, and we try to work on this, and it's difficult. I hate turning people away. I really do. It's actually something that bothers me, but it's difficult to provide the right kind of service for too many students. So that's generally the program. I hope I didn't speak too long. This is our contact information. Like I said, feel free to call me. With any general questions, we're fine with that. Again, it's not for the intake. Again, I'll refer you back to, the counselor, the case manager, if you have concerns. But if you just have general questions, please feel free. We are available.
Thank you. That was fantastic. I guess the related question to this that's kind of come up in the chat is, what happens when you just don't have room for somebody? What kind of support does that kid end up with if there isn't room in the program?
Yeah, and that's good. And I think also probably Ms. Steiner can speak as well. So if it comes to ISTEP and we talk, and I feel, or I speak to Maria, and we don't feel it's a student who needs a program, we're still going to go over what we can do for the student. So we'll sit at meetings. I'll sit with Ms. Steiner. I'll sit with Ms. Goodwin and say, okay, well, let's talk about some interventions. What have we not tried yet? Have we considered this? Have we spoken to, have we received a release to speak to an outside clinician? What more information can we gather about the student? What's the next step? And sometimes what we'll say is, you know what, maybe right now this is not a situation that requires ISTEP or something else, but let's monitor and see where this goes. And then maybe, it could be in a different situation later on, or room opens up at a later time. But yes, we don't just let the student go. We always kind of follow up and try to do more work and give people more information, at least from our end. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That was incredibly helpful. And I think everybody I talk to who knows about ISTEP, we all say we wish the program could be bigger. Duplicate you and Amy, and have more room for more students, because it is such a valuable program, and it keeps kids in the district who otherwise might be out of district.
Yeah, and that's important to note, is that it's sometimes it's like this, last step before we consider something else, and it should be considered, because it can make a difference between a student who needs to leave and who may not. So I definitely find value in that a lot. So
yeah, definitely. Okay, thank you. I think we're going to try to ask a few questions. If you guys can hang on for just a few more minutes. I know this has gone very long, but this was such amazing information that I think parents have really been craving for our middle school crowd. Let's see. First question was, what is the connection of anxiety to depression? And whoever wants to field that, and if we can try to keep it fairly short, because that's a big question.
I don't know if
Go ahead.
I'll just jump in just because. So it's funny, because I see anxiety and depression as the chicken or the egg. I have seen students who develop depression and they become anxious, and vice versa. So they're definitely interconnected. Okay, a student who's very anxious, imagine being on edge all the time. Your mind is racing with thoughts all the time, before bed, waking up in the middle of the night, during the day. And I'm not describing an adult. I'm describing a student. So think about a child who has this all the time. You're going to become so down every day. My thoughts are racing. How do I control it? What do I do about it? It's pointless. I'm not getting, and then that turns into like a depressive feature. And then a depression, right? We feel down. We feel like, nothing's happening. And then you start to develop like, well, nothing's going on. What am I going to do? Oh, everything's going poorly. And then the worry can kind of set in. So I see from both ends. They're treated differently in some situations, right? I mean, you have depression isolated there and anxiety here, but there is overlap. And that's why, obviously we're not talking about medication, but there's a reason why medications are addressing both. One med addresses both anxiety and depression because there's that link. So that's how I see it.
Perfect. Thank you. This one, Alison, while we still have you, this was directed more towards you. What do you think the district can do to get through to parents and students that college attendance isn't the end all to feed all? There are other options, trades, for example, are those options mentioned offered? That might be a big part of the discussion for our high school meeting in a couple of weeks too. But it does start in middle school, to your point, or earlier.
Yeah. That is also largely a family decision as well. And I do think it is more of a high school decision. One of the things, a previous superintendent, maybe, I don't know, we've had a few, but maybe about 3 ago, used to use the phrase college ready, regardless of whether we are sending a child to college or whether we are sending them to a trade program. They have to be college ready, because there's really very few trade jobs that does not have the same skills that we are looking for with kids, which is the ability to collaborate, the ability to think critically, the ability to engage with technology, the ability to read and to understand how to use primary sources, even if it's not to do a term paper, but if it's how to figure out how to solve a problem with an electrician's manual. So these are all skills that we are focusing on. As a middle school social worker, I can tell you in the time that I've been here, I probably met 4 kids who have said that they're not considering college. This is the kind of community that we are in. Ultimately, yes, more than 4 in a high school graduating class will choose to not go on to college, but that's really something that I believe is more of a guidance question than it is. We are mental health professionals. And that's not really something that I feel so qualified to answer.
Thank you. One last question here. Mike, this is probably more for you. Should an iStep program exist in our elementary schools?
Haha, very interesting question. That's a good question. So, yes. So yes, there absolutely should be.
I agree.
Yeah. No, years ago, actually, it's funny because when iStep at MMS first came about, I remember speaking to Ella Rideau, who was supervised special services back then, about getting elementary going. Because I think I was in Clinton at that time, and I was like, we should do something elementary style, but it just wasn't happening. And then the middle school thing came up, which it should have, because it was a huge need. But yes, it'd be wonderful to have something like that in elementaries. It's yeah. I mean, that's a quick answer, but yes, I agree. Yeah.
I think obviously it is so late. It is 9:17. I appreciate everyone bearing with us because this was just such invaluable information, I think, for families. Any last questions before we sign off? I think that's it. Thank you guys. I mean, honestly, the 3 of you for coming and spending this amount of time with us and sharing your knowledge and experience and passion for our kids is just, it's just always so inspiring, I think, to hear and to really see how passionate the people in our schools are about caring for our children and supporting our kids beyond academics. It's incredibly important to all of us. So for everyone else, we've recorded the meeting. We will send out a recap to everyone. I will touch base with everybody about getting slides and everything like that. It'll probably take me a week or so to pull it all together, but look out for an email. We'll also post it on our website. We'll make sure that we've got email addresses for everyone so you can ask questions as needed. I think that's it. Anybody have any last minute things to add? We good? All right, so we'll sign off. We've got, if you're interested in high school, we have a meeting coming up in 2 weeks where we're going to do all of this again, but talk about our older kids, which I think will be incredibly invaluable too. especially if you have a kid who is going to be in high school in the next year or so. I think it's really important to know kind of what's in the school and what's available, because, you know, even just knowing about a program like iStep, sometimes it doesn't get out to everyone, or knowing about the hub. Sometimes if you don't know about it, then you can't nudge your kid to go, or you can't ask the questions that you need to ask about supporting your child. So I think all the knowledge we have is beneficial to everybody. So I appreciate everyone's time. And let us know at SEPAC if you have any questions. We're happy to tell you what we know. And I think that's it.
Thank you
All
very
right.
much.
Thank you,
Thank
guys.
you.
Bye.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.